makes a good communicative activity? It provides a real or realistic reason to communicate. It allows learners to use what they already know or can already do. It also reveals gaps in what learners already know or can already do. They have appropriate time to do it, not too much and not too little. And they get constructive feedback afterwards, so they're able to communicate better in future in a similar task or communicative situation. Let's look at how you can address these points when using Optimise and teaching remotely. Here's an example from the B1 Plus level of Optimise. In the speaking lesson in Unit 5, students have lots of opportunities for natural communication with their peers. After watching a video and learning some useful vocabulary in exercises 1 and 2, exercise 3 invites learners to comment on what they can see in a photo and connect this to their own lives and personalities. This is a lot like one of the tasks they'll do in their exam. Exercises 4 and 5 invite them to think about their own plans for the future, to prepare to share these plans with another student by using some key phrases, and to share their ideas in a pair discussion before reporting back on what they learned to the rest of the class. If you were teaching this lesson in a face-to-face classroom, you might plan the groups and interaction differently than when teaching remotely. When teaching in a face-to-face classroom, we could simply follow the order of activities on the page, changing the interaction pattern occasionally to suit the type of activity and to provide variety. For example, we would probably watch the video as a whole class, get students to do the phrase expert box alone, then check their answers in pairs, do exercise 3 as a pair speaking activity for about 3 minutes, get students to make notes for exercise 4 individually for a couple of minutes, then do exercise 5 individually too, getting students to write full sentences using their ideas, and then putting them in pairs again to check each other's sentences for accuracy and sense. Finally, we get to exercise 6, where students have the most opportunity to speak. We've spent most of the lesson working individually and have just 10 minutes or so left for this speaking activity. And finally, some brief feedback. But when we're teaching remotely, we want to make the best use of synchronous time. That's the live lesson, when everyone is studying together at the same time in a virtual classroom. And we also want to make the best use of asynchronous time. That's individual self-study, when the learners are working independently before or after a live lesson. In a face-to-face classroom, we normally have a fixed amount of time with a large group of people who actually learn, think, and work at different speeds. We're trying to move them all forward at the same pace, and it's not easy. And we don't often have enough time for long, rich communicative activities. But when teaching remotely, students can take the time they need to prepare their ideas before a lesson. And when we're planning our lessons, we can look at the material and identify any activities where live interaction is absolutely essential, like this spoken discussion in exercise 6, and other activities where learners would really benefit from being able to work at their own pace and have time to think. For example, exercise 4, where they need to take notes about their summer plans and their future hopes or ambitions. This exercise in particular is very personal, and this is great for natural communication because it gives students a reason to speak and a reason to listen when their classmates are speaking. But I know that if I had someone ask me these things when I was a teenager, I wouldn't have been able to answer quickly. I would have needed time to think and prepare. And remote teaching is ideal for this, because as a learner, I can prepare my ideas before the live lesson, and then I can use the live class time with the other students to practice speaking about these ideas as much as possible. So as teachers, how does this affect our lesson staging? Well, when teaching communicative activities remotely, we can change the order of activities on the page slightly in order to make the best use of synchronous and asynchronous time and allow as much speaking practice and progress as possible. For example, we would probably get students to do exercises 1, 2, 4, and 5 on their own before the lesson. They can watch the video as many times as they need to in order to complete the phrase expert box and then check their own answers. They can take the time they need to make notes about their plans, hopes, and ambitions, and then to prepare the language they will need to communicate these ideas. Then, when they come to the live lesson, they can take a moment to review what they've prepared before, doing the photo discussion in pairs, getting some feedback from you on their use of language, and then trying again with a new partner. Doing the same with the longer discussion in exercise 6, sharing ideas once with one partner, getting some feedback from you, and then trying again with a new partner. And finally, the whole class feedback session becomes much richer because they've spent perhaps 30 minutes practicing speaking, and they've spoken to a couple of different classmates. Now you've planned your lesson, how can you use virtual classroom technology to conduct it? During a live synchronous lesson, the best way to conduct a communicative task like this is usually with breakout rooms. These are virtual rooms which are separate from the main classroom, so students can work in private pairs, just like they would in a face-to-face classroom. The most important things to remember are, firstly, that it can take time to set up the breakout rooms, so you should probably use them for longer activities and not just for quick pair checks. Secondly, that you'll need to manage your time carefully so that you can monitor the different groups equally during the course of the whole lesson, even if you aren't able to listen to every group for every activity. Thirdly, when you're monitoring, try not to interrupt and don't just type lots of mistakes into the chat box. This distracts students from the activity and from its purpose, which is usually fluency, not accuracy. Just take notes and use these later for group feedback, or send them to students individually to self-correct. And finally, the nature of technology means that communication works a little bit differently online, so you might need to teach your students some basic strategies for managing their interaction. For example, one natural feature of communication is turn-taking. This can be harder online. Even very short delays with audio or video can be confusing. Sometimes people start talking at the same time and then stop and start several times. And sometimes you can't hear the other person and you don't know why. Are they confused? Do they understand but have nothing to add? Is their microphone muted? Has their computer frozen? All of these things mean it's really important to manage the communication carefully. You can help your students do this by teaching them to use basic speaking strategies like checking understanding, inviting others to speak, clarifying meaning, and back-channeling. These are really important for online communication, of course, but turn-taking strategies like these will also help your students communicate and cooperate effectively in their speaking exam. In the next video, we'll look at ideas for homework when teaching remotely with Optimise.